A landmark ruling is expected in court next month to force the state to recognize religious marriages in the country.
This issue is not just about the religion. This issue is about the advancement of women and their rights within relationships.
Amid a 2-decade-long struggle to get the law to recognize their marriages, these are some experiences of South African women married in terms of religious law.
A lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of threats. And I knew for many years that he was having not one affair, but multiple affairs.
I got married Jewishly and civilly in 2009. I married a man who wasn't well, and unfortunately 3 years later he passed away. I had an extremely good and happy marriage.
Together with a friend, Michelle co-founded Go Getters, an organization aimed at helping spouses facing challenges with a Jewish divorce document, referred to as a get.
In Judaism, the way you get married both civilly and religiously, and when you get divorced, you have to get divorced religiously, and the way that that works is there's a document which the man needs to give a woman in order to effect a divorce. It's called the get. So he needs to give it and she needs to receive it. If one of those parties refuse either to give or receive, there's a problem.
This woman cannot be identified as the law prohibits us from identifying parties to divorce proceedings. She experienced challenges in her marriage and is now struggling to be freed from it.
I was married in November 1998 in an Orthodox synagogue to an Orthodox man. We had two children. During that time. After 7 years, the marriage started to go downhill. A lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of threats. And I knew for many years that he was having not one affair, but multiple affairs. And the best part is that they abuse you back by trying to say to you, I'm going to make sure that I destroy your life, and without me, you're nothing. And if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be the person that you are today.
Because of her struggles to get her husband to give her a divorce, she consulted a lawyer.
The issues with the get was that the husband would not grant the wife a get. The circumstances in which he refused to grant the get was to do with the children, his relationship with the children, and the fact that he had not seen them for quite some time, and the fact that the children did not actually want to see him. The agreement that we came into and the issues that he had was that he wanted to see the children. However, the children were under a court-appointed case manager who we had to coordinate meetings between the children and the father. Once this was undertaken, put into an agreement that such meetings will be held between the father and the children, only then would he actually grant her the get.
She also went to the Beth Din, the Jewish religious court, but they couldn't successfully persuade her husband. Diane Rappaport has been a judge at the Beth Din for over 30 years. He says in the majority of cases, the wife initiates the application for a get, even though both parties can.
The purpose of the Beth Din involvement in the get, or the judge's involvement in the get, is to make sure that it's carried out correctly. But the actual granting of the divorce is done by the husband. The husband grants the divorce to his wife.
In South Africa, Jewish marriages are conducted in religious and civil law. Section 5 of the Divorce Act wants the religious law to be finalized before the civil contract can be ended.
I was really not asking for much. It was just simple maintenance to look after the kids, give me the house, which was part of the ANC, and then comply with minimal maintenance, and he refused. So at that point, that's when the legal process started, and today we're sitting in the year 2018, and the civil process is with the High Court and with the High Court judge, with multiple judgments against him and waiting case management report to finalize the civil divorce. So there is monies in trust, and he wants that trust money to be given to the lawyers instead of the children's maintenance.
Having paid close to R1 million in legal fees, she says she is happy her therapy business helps take care of the family, because neither the Beth Din nor the civil courts have managed to persuade the father of her children to take care of them.
I've had a lot of financial assistance from my family to get me through this process and to keep the roof under my head and to keep my house, which he claims half is his. And together with the fact that he's liquidated all his money and his monies and trusts and everything else with that. To date, it's nothing under R1 million, I would say, and still outstanding legal costs, which is still pending. And yet he claims he has nothing and that his girlfriend is looking after him.
If a man takes a wife and is intimate with her, and it happens that she does not find favor in his eyes because he has found something immoral about her, he must write a bill of divorce for her, place it into her hand, and send her away from his house. Often people say to us, why can't we just change the Jewish law? Why don't you just change the Jewish law? The problem is that this is a law that was given to us by God. It's not a rabbinic law.
Michelle says although many of the people they help are women, there are men that seek their help too. Their Facebook page now has a large following.
In the case of women, the situation is more serious. If I was married to someone and they refused to divorce me, I cannot marry religiously. It probably will affect, it can affect me financially, it can affect me spiritually. If I were to fall pregnant while still married to another man, there is a stain on on my child that is born. There's a very serious problem with that. And it's just, I'm unable to move forward with my life because I'm still married to another person. Even if I've got my civil divorce, I'm unable to move forward.
She says in extreme cases, some people have resorted to extortion.
If you pay me R2.5 million, then I'll give you the divorce. Another case we worked on was a very bitter divorce. The man refused to move out of the marital home. Even though the house was in her name, he said, well, that's my house. For 7 years, they lived under the same roof. Terrible, terrible situation.
The Beth Din acknowledges that it lacks the power to force people to comply, even though they sometimes face isolation and possible excommunication.
We are not happy that the Jewish court can't intervene with a Jewish couple who are getting divorced or even rule in matters of alimony, maintenance, visitation rights, or custody. We're not happy about it. But the fact is that this is the law of the Republic, that only the courts can rule in this matter, and we have to abide by the laws of the Republic. We have no choice. But I don't think it's a particularly good thing. I think that when it comes to Jewish couples who get married under Jewish law and get divorced under Jewish law, then all matters pertaining to the marriage and divorce should also be decided on based on Jewish law.
I got married at the age of 18. We were planning to get married, but I fell pregnant before the time. So we were kind of forced to get married. So I was 18 at the time. As a Muslim woman, you're not always entitled to lots of things. You need to have grounds in order to get a divorce. So it was difficult in a way, but eventually they gave the divorce to me because I did have grounds.
Islamically, I'm supposed to get an amount every month for taking care of my son, and then besides what my ex-husband pays for maintenance. So he essentially, what he pays for maintenance will cover the travel to my son's school every month, but the rest comes from me. When it comes to maintenance and taking care of your kids, once you've divorced, there doesn't seem to be any kind of penalty at all. Men get away with things and have been getting away with things for many years and will continue to get away with things for as long as religious leaders stay silent.
Both of these women say they approached the Muslim Judicial Council but didn't receive any help. The Ihata Shelter's director, Noreen Osman, says they provide assistance to abused women.
Islamically, we know that economically the child is the father's responsibility. But modern day men, Muslim men, are taking the approach that, well, your mother works, your mother is a professional, she should come up with 50% of your expenses. And this is not the Islamic model. The justification for abuse is often perpetuated because of religion and by religious leaders. And so religious leaders will provide the men with excuses as to why it is okay for them to abuse her. Her family will in turn tell her to be patient.
Children here also carry the scars of abuse.
We have an on-site creche and an on-site nursery, and you could just tell what abuse has done to these children. Many of our children are very insecurely attached. And so the mother can't even leave them for 5 minutes, and they're in tears and they feel abandoned. Our organization have engaged religious leaders in the Western Cape around issues of gender, and there's a keenness and a willingness and a wanting to change. But then I read articles about how women here in Cape Town have been banned from the mosque, and I wonder, it's the two worlds of one, allowing women to engage a religion that is ours too.
Dr. Fatima Sidat, an expert in Muslim law, advocates for differing interpretations of the law.
The interpretations of faith are male-based. They are male-centered. They give preference to male ways of being. What a feminist approach to religion does generally is argues from a women's point of experience of knowing the world. Not to say that women should be preferenced, but rather to understand that our interpretations come entirely from our experiences. And so to argue for one interpretation is to argue for one experience.
Sheikh Riyad Fattar of the Muslim Judicial Council encourages women to open cases against their abusers. Contrary to saying women should stay in abusive marriages, their approach is to first counsel the couple.
We can't live in a society where everybody is just marrying and divorcing and marrying and divorcing. There must be a process of counseling. There must be a process of looking at the issues that are at hand. And it's a subject that the MGC has taken very seriously. In actual fact, we had a march against women abuse. We marched down Cliffontein Road here in Athlone, and so that we can create that kind of awareness. So that is top priority for the Muslim Judicial Council. It's top priority for any of the clergy. One don't want to see any kind of abuse.
After 20 years of campaigning for the recognition of Muslim marriages, the Women's Legal Centre anticipates the ruling regarding this case in August.
For the Women's Legal Centre, this issue is not just about the religion. This issue is about the advancement of women and their rights within relationships. And they deserve the protections of the Constitution to be able to ensure that their marriage is firstly recognized, because it's undignified. Secondly, upon the dissolution of the marriage, that they need the protections to ensure that they are not evicted, that they are not put out of their homes, that they have a right to maintenance. They've got a right to be able to look after their children. And if we confine this to one particular identity, which is of this particular woman, which is the fact that she is married in terms of Islamic law, then that would be a disservice. because we are not looking at all the other forms of intersecting levels of discrimination, which is the fact is that she's woman, the fact that she's black, the fact that she's living in South Africa, and historically, women in South Africa never had access to land, to housing, or even the protections of the state in terms of their relationships.
The recent victory at the Constitutional Court on behalf of the Hanukkah family regarding the Wills Act has given many the hope that this battle will finally be won.
The implication of the Hanukkah matter, which was a recent judgment in the Constitutional Court, was that they declared a provision in the Wills Act unconstitutional to the extent that it did not include Muslim spouses, but in particularly spouses married in terms of polygynous Muslim marriages, and those that were not registered in terms of civil marriage or in terms of what we call the Marriage Act. Although there has been a range of cases and the courts have come to the assistance of Muslim women over the years, because currently we have a state or a vacuum in our law where religious marriages or Muslim marriages is not recognized in South Africa. And the consequence of that is that women in those marriages are not protected upon the dissolution of the marriage, whether or not it's by death, like in the Hanukkah family, or even upon divorce.
Over the years, various individuals who could afford to have approached the courts and scored victories on some matters, and legislation such as the Domestic Violence Act, which recognizes partners in a Muslim marriage as spouses. However, activists say these are piecemeal successes. In 2003, the state introduced the Muslim Marriages Bill. It was approved for public comment and was supposed to be tabled in Parliament, but never was.
It's not as much as to whether the bill is going to allow the absolute equality between men and women, because the bill does not give equality between men and women. If we look at Sharia as a system of ethics, guided by 5 objectives, or objectives around the preservation of life, the care for human dignity, the protection of property, the protection of community and consciousness, right? Conscience, human conscience. If those are the 5 ethical principles that guide the way in which we perform law, then there's a great chance that we'll have a lot less of the kinds of abuses that we have.
The Muslim bill, in essence, looks at trying to recognize the Muslim Marriage Act and then place the Muslim marriage law in terms of Islamic law, place it within that act so that it can then be regulated by the courts. We know in any society where a society is not regulated by laws, then people tend to act outside of what we would expect them to act.
There's also been strong opposition to allowing secular courts to regulate Sharia or Islamic law. In an emailed response, the Jamiatul Ulama of South Africa says, gender equality is in conflict with the Quran. According to Muslim Marriages Bill, man and woman have equal status, whereas the Quran Majid directs, for men there is a rank above women. The demand is to abstain from interference with the Sharia and that Sharia law itself should be the law. The MJC accuses the state of lacking the political will to act. It also says opposition to the bill is not about the different understandings of the law.
This is the unfortunate part of when people say it's contrary to Sharia law. Because when you use a general term like that, then it points out it's one of 2 things. It's either you don't understand what you are talking about, or you are purposefully wanting people to think that Islam as a whole is against this thing. We have our young people that are saying, but our marriages are recognized now already, isn't it? And we, from the Muslim clergy, have to say, no, it's not. And they can't be. How can that be? We are from the soil, like everybody else. And our government is one that accommodates everybody. This is the rainbow nation of Nelson Mandela.
Many agree there must be a law regulating religious marriages, but some say they are uncomfortable with secular courts adjudicating their matters.
Secular courts, by their very nature, would not be able to deal with the issues that confront the couples very easily, simply because they won't have the background on the practice of religious custom. That is why quite often our courts, when they are confronted with religious issues that arise from religious differences, religious practices, do refer the parties to, for instance, my organization, the South African Hindu Mahasabha.
Hindu couples wanting to divorce first seek counsel within their community because of their common cultural and religious values.
The elders in the family are called in to mediate and to attempt to resolve the problem. But when that fails, then even before they go to courts, they would invite highly respected individuals in the community, like priests, for instance, and person like myself as the head of the Hindu community. You're invited to attempt to get the couple to go together, first of all, to try and resolve their differences and reconcile them.
In 2005, an alternative bill was drafted by the Gender Commission, the Recognition of Religious Marriages Bill, in due regard for all women's rights in religious marriages, but this also never went anywhere.
The CGE will always remain amicus curiae to make sure that the rights of women and children in South Africa are upheld. Because we always say, as creatures of the Constitution in terms of Section 181 and specifically Section 187, we will fight that South Africa becomes a country free of gender oppression and inequality. In South Africa, you are faced with a myriad of challenges where even young girls are forced into marriage, and some women don't even consent to their marriage because of certain traditional and customary and religious rights that are upheld and that are social constructs. And therefore, you need to make sure that women are entitled to their rights and freedoms within those marriages.
The state is accused of discriminating against religious marriages because it recognizes African marriages through the Customary Marriages Act and civil partnerships or marriages through the Civil Union Act. For now, it is a lobbying and waiting game with the hope that the constitutional state and its values will win the day.
We have a constitutional state. Where the state needs to promote, protect, and foster conditions to ensure that women are protected. And the state must take that obligation seriously. So they must either bring in legislation or they need to amend existing legislation to be able to protect those women.